I appreciate the opportunity to speak with you and your audience. And I think about a topic that's very passionate to all of us. I've watched a number of your episodes, and I know a lot of the dialogue on yours and many others is about our monetary system, and in particular for millennials, how do you deal with a crumbling debt, inflationary-based fiat system that makes life so much harder? How do you expect to be able to provide the foundational things of life, food and shelter, to build a family, to be able to build wealth and some economic security, when it is so challenging for many people, particularly, to work 2 or 3 jobs just to try to survive? And they look back on these alleged halcyon days of their parents or grandparents, when on one income you were able to have a house and raise some kids and not have to work constantly. And I think it's a real struggle for many people, and particularly millennials and people of younger generations. And I'm obviously not a millennial, but I do have 2 children who are. And so I see that in their experiences. But, I think it's more than just, and if we can just dive right into it, I think it's more than just building wealth. I think there's a component to it that's critically important for your generation and the generations to come, is if you subscribe to the idea that we are at a point of dramatic change in social structures and in our world order, whether it's from a fourth turning viewpoint or a sovereign individual, or from looking at the exponential pace of technological change and its impacts, whether it's from a Jeff Booth perspective or Peter Diamandis, I think many of us can agree we are going to see a change in our economic, social, and technological structures, which none of us can really comprehend. When I was growing up, none of us could comprehend that we would be waving a phone in front of a terminal to pay for something. People were still using cash and checks. No one would believe. There was a comic strip. Dick Tracy was a detective, and he had a phone on his wristwatch. And that was science fiction. And now it's an everyday occurrence.
Yes.
So we're going to see so many changes. And I think what's really important, and it's part of why I wrote the book and want to have discussions like this, is, Bitcoin, I think many of us see as a foundational layer, which can be a more solid foundation to build new structures and institutions to serve all of humanity. And so it's important that we give some consideration and some thought to what do these new structures, what do we want them to look like? It's going to be your generation that is going to be the builders of these structures. And so we have to give some thought to it. And again, I discussed this in the book a bit, is that, we have lost so many of the guidance structures in our culture and societies around the world because of the rise of an all-consuming culture of commercialism and consumerism. We've lost many of the guardrails and the guiding principles, these philosophical, spiritual, religious, ethical, moral principles, which are really the deeper meaning of life. And so for those that are going to be building these new structures and institutions, we need to think about what we want them to look like and to be built on deeper and more profound universal principles that really transcend just money.
Yes, well, I love that you dove in immediately, and thank you for your kind words. I think what I take away from this is that I also love your compassion. I mean, obviously, it's also for your children, right? And while you're talking, I'm thinking, we talk a lot about how Bitcoin could be a certain base layer of value, etc. And I think what I take away from what you said is, and that's a recurring theme I think also in this podcast, is that what we are experiencing in our the phase of our lives that we're in as millennials is realizing that everything that was, sold or told to us about how our life would go, we realize that it's not going like that. But at the same time, we also see, this huge technological advancement, right? Your book is called Money, Love, and Bitcoin, Creating a Path to a Freer, Fairer, and More Peaceful World. I think anyone in the world would probably want that. But if you don't have a foundation to, work upon, build upon, right? Like that's going to be a hard goal to achieve. And so I think talking to you today is a great opportunity to kind of philosophize about how does Bitcoin go further than just air quotes just fixing our money. Like what would emanate from a clear, decentralized, base layer, basically.
Absolutely. As you described, and many of you guys talk about, there is this feeling of this overwhelming challenge of life, especially for generations coming up, when they see that the old program isn't working as well for them as it seemed to have worked for other generations. So there's great challenge, but in that is also great opportunity. And there's, some wise teachers have said, pain pushes, but vision pulls. And so the pain can push us to a framework of looking for a new vision. But we need more people articulating what this vision is going to look like. How do we get there? And I certainly don't have all the answers, and I'm not trying to say that. But I think, as you said, we can all agree we would like to see a freer, fairer, and more peaceful world. All of our visions of exactly what that might look like for our lives are going to have unique flavors to them. But it is a tremendous opportunity to use the challenges to push us in a direction of a new vision. And so we have to have these dialogues about what we want to construct, and we have to actively do it. Otherwise, the existing power structures and forces may create these dystopian horrors of science fiction, which frankly are the visions that have been created in the last 50 years in most media of what the vision of the future is, of these centralized control structures, these 1984 scenarios, these Mad Max visions of the future of humanity. And if we don't counterpoint that with a more optimistic vision of humanity, with a true dream of how the planet can use the potential of the greater abundance than we've ever seen before to create a system that works for all of us, not just a few who, frankly, through ignorance, are misguided into believing that their control structures are going to make them happy and going to make everyone else happy. And, as you mentioned, we do have tremendous new technological tools that can pave our way for a greater degree of abundance. And I think, it's a unique thing within the Bitcoin space. We talk about scarcity, and it's important in a monetary framework, yet we do live in an abundant universe. It's not that we don't have enough energy. We just may not have enough human ingenuity to channel that energy into ways in which we want to direct it for power to drive systems and technology. After all, look around. Food grows on trees. I live in a beautiful tropical island, and you walk around and mangoes and avocados grow on trees right here. And that's not to say we don't have a tremendous problem with many people on the planet facing privation and starvation and a lack of resources. But I do believe that we have the opportunity to really fundamentally change the systems and structures, not in some way of creating this equal collective nature. All of us, I think, in the Bitcoin space understand that perhaps guided by noble ideas, in implementation, that structure does not work and can lead to some of the most horrific outcomes that we have seen in humanity by misguided people using authority and control to attempt to centrally plan for others what they should have, what they should do. And then, in fact, the free markets and individuals deciding for themselves in this giant interconnected web of life is a much better mode to operate on.
Bitcoin custody is evolving, and OnRamp is leading this change with multi-institution custody, eliminating single points of failure. Instead of relying on one institution, OnRamp secures your Bitcoin in a cold storage multi-sig vault backed by 3 independent custodians, where no single party can move your funds alone, providing an unprecedented level of security. Your assets are protected by a 100 million Lloyd's of London insurance policy, with all transactions fully auditable on-chain and only executed at your direction. This means complete transparency and control over your assets at all times. Beyond custody, OnRamp provides comprehensive Bitcoin services that include trading, lending, inheritance planning, and IRAs. You can view them as your private Bitcoin banking partner tailored to your wealth preservation goals. Whether you're new to Bitcoin or an experienced holder, OnRamp's approach helps you secure your generational wealth with unmatched security and peace of mind. You can sign up at onrampbitcoin.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to receive $150 in Bitcoin after your first deposit. If you first want to learn more, you can also book a free consultation via their website to speak with one of their Bitcoin custody experts. Tell them you came through me, and they'll take extra good care of you. Bitcoin is financial sovereignty, so why compromise when you need liquidity? Meet Debify, the Bitcoin-backed lending platform made by Bitcoiners for Bitcoiners. Debify connects you to institutional-grade liquidity and allows you to borrow fiat or stablecoins, all while keeping your Bitcoin 100% under your control with a non-custodial 3 out of 4 multi-sig escrow solution. Get competitive rates from a global marketplace of institutional-grade lenders, with loan terms that you choose, from 1 month up to a year. There are no hidden fees and there is no rehypothecation, just pure Bitcoin-aligned lending with the highest level of transparency and security. Are you ready to unlock liquidity without ever selling a single sat? Go to debify.com/Bram, that's BRAM, to check out their current lending offers. That's debify.com/Bram. Yeah, a current theme that I'm exploring, or like a term that I'm finding a lot this week is fiat money causes like a distortion. And because I like what you said about if we have a true, it's a free market, or what you said, like what Bitcoiners think is the whole proof of work thing, right? I think if you do the work, if you have real merit, even then it would be possible for you to not exceed in a world that has a fiat money system, right? So either you don't succeed, or, and I think that's also a big problem, a lot of people are incentivized to not even try, right? So to have like other people, as you said, like control, whatever their paradigm is, and model, have different models and see how they can steer behavior. It's all paper plans, right? Like it's a lot of talk. And I think that's also what draws us a lot to like this Austrian economics thinking, right? Like human action. If I want something or I have a certain need, then that's what I want to solve. But if there are like surrounding factors that prohibit me from either doing that or actually giving me a perverse incentive and steering me the other way, then I cannot benefit from any of my own work, or maybe also the work of others, right? Like the whole technological advancement. I have to think about, I found a new guy from Wall Street, Jordi Visser. He talks a lot about like the AI revolution, and that, like a lot of white collar jobs are going to disappear. A lot of blue collar jobs too, right? Like this is really going to be like 100 years of innovation in 10 years. And nobody is really ready for it. And I feel like that is really the moment that we're in. It's going to be chaos, but not many people see that yet. And that's why I feel like Bitcoin is a part of your anticipation of that happening and your like prep of that happening. Does that make sense?
No, absolutely. And what you just said is really the end point of my book and that vision of what's going to happen and what are the opportunities when we get to this abundant stage. But to wind back to the beginning of what you said, I think that's critically important. And it's really where I start the dialogue about money and leave it as that. There's many tremendous books that people can read about monetary history. There's filled with charts and graphs and all sorts of Fed speak. And those are wonderful for those that are interested in that. But most people aren't, quite frankly. Most people don't understand what money is. And I was a certified financial planner and was a financial advisor in the US for 20 years. And I understood investments, but I didn't really understand what money is. So here's how I frame it. And I think it's really important for the discussion, particularly about millennials, in terms of creating wealth.
Yeah. Sorry, I almost want to say, like, can you repeat that again? Right? Like, I think we should emphasize more that not understanding what money is nothing to be ashamed of or something, because we are all bamboozled. Even people that are, like deep into the system and think they are participating in something they understand, right?
Absolutely. I mean, as I say in the book, we may not believe in God, but we know the power of a Benji, of $100 US bill. So that's money, isn't it? But we don't think about what's important about money. And actually in my practice, that's what I emphasize with most of my clients, that it's not about the money. It's about what the money can do for you. It's about your own vision of life. And if you don't have that, then it really doesn't matter how much money you have, because you need to be driven by a vision greater than just accumulation of things. And so you hit on a point that I think is very important, and this is what I go into in the book, which is, money is simply a technology to account for, transfer, and exchange and store value between people. But it's the people, it's all of us that are creators of that value, whether we are growing food, running a business to serve people's needs, digging iron out of the ground and melting it into steel and building buildings, creating art or music. We are the creators of value. And only through the creation of value and serving others is money necessary or useful. So we have to start with the creation of value. The unfortunate thing in this distorted system, and it's accurate, is that we've begun to reward with these units of currency that we're using as money, extractive behavior. Behavior that actually extracts value from others, whether it's systemically in an inflationary system fueled by debt with government money printing, or by occupations that people can make a lot of money at, but don't necessarily add any value. Whether it's because the nature of the system that exists, or because just the reward and incentive structures that exist. So, foreign currency hedging and that whole industry, which is billions and trillions of dollars, is a necessary function when we have these disparate fiat currencies, but it really adds no value to humanity. High-frequency algorithmic trading adds no value, even though you can make money at it. So it's important for people to think, to start with, if they want to build wealth, if they want to contribute to humanity, we have to be creating value. We have to be doing of something that others see as value, that serves other humans' needs. And if we all go to that perspective, I think that's going to be a huge shift, rather than just looking, how can we pull in the most money for ourselves? How can we accumulate greater wealth, even if it is at the cost of extracting it from others? The more we're adding value, the better we will all be off. So it really starts there.
I've previously described Bitcoin as engineered money in the past, and I was happy that you described Bitcoin in your book as the first engineered form of money in human history. So I think that's the same, right? And I wanted to explore, right, because we are talking about this distortion emanating from fiat money, touching our incentives, eventually our actions. What aspects of the design of Bitcoin do you see as suited to restore trust and integrity and create that predictable base layer or transparent base layer, however you want to call that, on which when we build, we actually get to, I think, my idea of capitalism, right? Like incentivize to work, figure out if you're good enough, if people want to have it. If not, that's okay. You try something else, so people would then be constantly busy and searching for, what is the thing that I can do to add value to others, and then get obviously rewarded for that, if that is, air quotes, good enough. Like what are the characteristics of Bitcoin you think could help us get to that place?
Well, as an engineered form of money that has all of the features of a permissionless, trustless, decentralized form of money, not controllable by any one party, and that has a scarcity built into the protocol, it limits this extractive behavior and the control structures of governments and institutions. And so that just provides a sounder protocol and a framework. But I think it's very important to conceptualize and understand that as a technology, it is simply a technology. And, we create tools to serve as means to ends. The tools are not the end. So humans created a hammer, and we can become very enamored by a hammer alone, but a hammer is used to build things. A hammer is used to build a house, to provide shelter to people. So it's just a technology. It's just a tool to get somewhere that humans want to go. Mm-hmm. Now, of course, technologies can be used for poor reasons. You can also use a hammer to hit somebody over the head and steal their wallet. And so we need to have these guardrails that I mentioned, the moral, the ethical, the spiritual, the philosophical principles behind which we exercise the technologies that we develop. We've seen technologies developed that can destroy all of humanity. So we can develop a technology, we can develop a tool, an atom bomb, but if we are not guided by deeper and more profound principles in how we use these technologies, we have real problems. It's why I think, there's that meme in the Bitcoin space, fix the money, fix the world. And I think fixing the money is a critical foundation for it, but simply fixing the money is not going to fix the world unless we do it based on a recognition of deeper principles that connect us all. We are all unique individuals on a planet of 8 billion humans, all with our own point of reference and state of consciousness, amongst trillions of other creatures and critters on this planet and fauna and flora. And like the Bitcoin node web, we are all interconnected to really have a value here. And so we're all unique points, but we live in an interconnected web. And I think if we can begin to understand that, even though it's hard to conceptualize that, because just as in quantum physics has revealed, there aren't these indestructible building blocks of atoms that are the foundation of everything. Everything is energy. Everything is frequencies. We as humans perceive a desk as a solid object when it's simply composed of an arrangement of energy. It's not our normal human experience. We experience life through our own eyes, through our own point in time and space. But if we can begin to recognize every human as a unique and valuable member of a community, of an interconnected web of life, then as we go about building systems and structures based on a more sound money, based on a base layer that, as Karl Menger, the Austrian economist said, value does not exist in any particular object. Value is a function of human consciousness. So it is our consciousness that ascribes value to things. And what we ascribe value to is a reflection of our consciousness. And ultimately, that's why, the title of my book, Money, Love, and Bitcoin. Now, most people, even if you don't understand much about Bitcoin, can get this connection. Okay, money has something to do with Bitcoin. I get that. But what's this funny word love doing in the middle? What does that have to do with anything? And, the late, great Tina Turner sang a song, "What's Love Got to Do with It?" Now, she wasn't talking about money or economics, but I am. And my answer is, I think it's got everything to do with it. Because, again, if you ask anybody, no matter how much money they have, would you rather have love or a Lamborghini? I think the answer of most emotionally mature people is going to be, love is more important than a Lambo. Now, there's nothing wrong with having a Lambo. Great, okay? But most of us are seeking really that middle word in my book. And that's the opportunity we have, is to recognize more of that. Why we can't achieve a more peaceful world, when if you asked anybody, would you rather live in war or peace? They would answer peace. That's the vision that can pull us to new social structures. There's no doubt violence exists, fear exists. All of these things are part of the framework that we have grown up in and that societies and cultures have grown up in. But, the rewards of violence, from a sovereign individual book standpoint, are diminishing over time as we move into cyberspace. Even without that, if we have a deeper philosophical framework about this interconnected web of life, whether it's from a Christian framework of saying, what you do to the least of my brothers, you do unto me, or whether you take it from a Taoist or a yogic standpoint, we all know that to be true. And so if we can move to a greater age of abundance, where we don't have to see this as this zero-sum game, that I have to take something from you to meet my basic needs, and the incentives to violence can diminish, then we have an opportunity for a flourishing of humanity, I think, which really is the dream and the vision that can pull us somewhere new. And some people must say, oh, that's airy-fairy, that's idealistic. Well, don't we want to have ideals? Don't we want to have bold visions for humanity and for our planet? Do we really want to be guided by these dystopian control structures, by visions of horror and the use of violence to extract things from other people? I don't think that's what we want. So if most of the talk is about this, and I say this, for example, when we talk about AI, and I mentioned in the book, if these large language models that run AI are pulling information from a language that's mostly of violence, fear, greed, destruction, taking things from others, then the outputs of that are going to reflect that. If they're instead based on love, compassion, the interconnected nature of all humanity, the unique nature of every individual and their own unique gifts and talents and a respect for that, then the outputs of AI are going to look very different. So let's do that.
If you want to self-custody your Bitcoin stack, I recommend the Blockstream Jade Plus. I've been using this premium Bitcoin-only hardware wallet for a few months now, and I love its design and ease of use. What makes it stand out is its open source hardware and software, and Blockstream's unique genuine check, which makes sure that your device is authentic. No backdoors or compromises. You can connect with the Jade Plus however you want. Bluetooth, USB-C, or you can go fully air-gapped with its built-in camera for cable-free QR transactions. The metal case feels solid and the color screen is easy to read. And it connects with your favorite Bitcoin apps like Blockstream Green, Sparrow, and Electrum. Get your Jade Plus today at store.blockstream.com and use code BRAM to get 10% of your entire order. Let's talk about something that not a lot of people think about before it's too late. Where are you storing your Bitcoin seed words? Are they truly secure? I found my solution with Stampseed. It's an elegant all-in-one titanium plate solution with no separate pieces to lose or manage. Your seed phrase gets permanently stamped into pure titanium that withstands fire, survives water, and lasts for generations. Unlike shallow etching methods, Stampseed's patented tools help you to deeply stamp every letter for permanent readability, protecting your financial legacy. When you order a titanium seed plate from Stampseed, you can also upload a custom design or your logo to customize the back of your plate to make it fully personalized. Paper seed phrases are a disaster waiting to happen. Secure your Bitcoin with Stampseed for decades to come. Visit stampseed.com and use code BRAM, that's BRAM, to get 15% off your order.
It kind of ties into what I call Bitcoin is a mirror. So we are living in a almost a parallel way right now, and showing how we think about the future, right? Like the less doom and gloom, less nihilistic outlook that a lot of people have, and I think that ties into this distortion that we're thinking about, that we talked about before. Because who doesn't want to have hope for the future? Who doesn't think about a better future for either yourself or your children? Like, it is such a pity that distortion or the fiat money enchantment is so strong that people kind of like lose that hope for this wonderful life that they've been given. You can only experience Bitcoin if you adopt it voluntarily. And once you adopt it voluntarily, you realize that it forces you, through its characteristics, to do work for it, right? To really do the work. And I think that's a hard sell if people don't understand that yet, because then you say, well, this is a money that you have to actually work for. Like that's not a good sell. But I think there are certain elements in Bitcoin that force us to be honest and transparent and do the work, all these things that fiat money actually takes away from us. So I see it as it's kind of like a Trojan horse technology. It's like people come for the number go up, but they stay for the revolution once they understand that this is a better money. You can move to this money system. It's like a big philosophical war.
No, very good points. And transition periods are not easy. Change is something that we all struggle with. Yet, as we know, change is constant in the material world. And, one of the quotes that I open the book with, and I actually use it twice, is from a futurist long before your generation, R. Buckminster Fuller, who said, "You never change the existing reality by fighting it. You build a new reality that makes the old one obsolete."
Yes.
And so I think that's what Bitcoin has the potential to do.
I agree.
And once we have a momentum there and get over that tipping point, if you will, then if, as I think Jeff Booth is probably the most profound articulator of this idea, that in a sound money or Bitcoin system and a natural free market, prices will fall to the marginal cost of production. If we can shift from this inflationary system to a deflationary system where prices begin to fall, then you don't need to convince people of the monetary technology. They don't need to understand it. Just like I don't have the slightest clue how my cell phone works, but I know it works and it's very useful. And it provides a great value to me, much more than old copper landline rotary dial phone that I grew up with. So I don't need to understand the technology to see the benefits. And when we get to that point, if we can, and that's the incumbent part on all of us that are leaders, is to create that vision for something beyond just a few people are going to get rich quick by just being early. If we can frame it as something for all of humanity, then when prices begin to fall, people can get on board. Now it begs the question, then what are we going to do? And that, again, is really where I get to the end point in my book, because I think this is where we have the opportunity to, people will not have to do the same level of activity that they are forced to do simply to make ends meet, to do jobs that they may not like or desire to do, that aren't their heart's calling and passion, simply because you got to work at McDonald's and you got to be a security guard and you got to do whatever just to feed your family. If the prices can begin to fall, and instead of having to work 40 or 60 or 80 hours a week, you might have to add 20 hours of value a week because prices are falling, then life gets easier rather than harder. And then we can begin to think not only about how do we really want to express our own unique gifts and talents, while adding some value in an economic framework. And hopefully, over time, what are we going to do with this extra time? And, this is where I think having a return to some of the more deeper and profound philosophical, spiritual, if you will, principles that we have discarded in the name of rational-based science. And that's a critically important thing. You're not going to build a bridge without those things. Yet you are also not going to understand the nature of life and your place in the cosmos with a calculator.
Yes.
Or a spreadsheet. It takes a different method of inquiry to do that. And so I'm hopeful that if we can, in fact, have this greater age of abundance, because, again, we pull out the extractive behavior, the things that suck and rob value from all of us who may be working hard in this inflationary system, then we can free up a little more spaciousness, all right, to have a little more luxury to think about the deeper meaning of life and how we're really going to contribute and what we want to do and what sort of structures we want to build.
I couldn't agree more. I think that it's very important when you think about this, that the abundance doesn't lead to everyone just chilling and hanging around, right? I think it brings us to having the space and time where we can figure out, what is going on here? The real bigger picture, and also, that you have the ability to do or to figure out what you are here to do, or what you are here to bring. I'm thinking about something I shared before. I wrote something like this: because Bitcoin is structured and predictable, it gives us a solid base layer to explore the unknown and search for chaos and innovation. That is something different than chaos at the base layer, which is fiat money, which makes us insecure and unadventurous. People are doing things they don't like, and that sounds kind of maybe utopian, right? Like life should be fun all the time. That's not what I mean. I think it's more about finding the way that you can add a lot of value to the world. I'm seeing the nice painting behind you, right? Like maybe you're a painter deep inside, but now you are doing some shit job that you don't want to do because you're forced to do that, right? Like that is not experiencing life like it's been given to you.
Right. And again, we are producing so many products that the marketers tell us is going to make us happy. Oh, buy this and you will feel content and happy and your life will be beautiful.
Yes.
And we buy it. It works for about a week or two, and then there's something else that we have to make us happy. So we all know that that's not really the answer. Yet without a clear vision or an opportunity or the spaciousness to explore what really might, we go for the quick fixes. We become addicted to the shopping systems, to the alcohol, to the sexing, whatever it may be that is a distraction from the pain that we feel by not really being able to explore some of these deeper issues of humanity, or express ourselves by painting or creating music or developing some incredible new technology, simply because this is going to propel us into a new direction as humanity. We have, all of us, incredible talents and abilities, and so many people on the planet were missing the contribution they could make because they're trapped in systems that don't allow that seed to bear fruit. And again, many people might look at this and go like, you're living in some kind of dream world, you're delusional, that's just not reality. And again, yes, transition periods and much of life has not seemed that way. And we are living in a different time. We are propelling ourselves from an analog age to a digital age, a pace of technological development and capacity which humanity has never seen before. How are we going to use it to serve humanity, not to control humanity?
Yeah. I think many people would agree if you say, like, how can we benefit from this technological advancement? And I got this from Jeff Booth, and I think from Lynn Alden as well. You cannot price huge technological innovation, which is deflationary, with an inflationary money, right? So if you price it in something that's inflationary, you're actually going to, remove the gains that could have been with the introduction of a new technology. And when I realized that, I also thought about, like, okay, in the 1970s or something, or 60s maybe, people said, like, in the 2020s they're going to have flying cars, right? Like, it is probably a correct vision of the future, right? If you think about accelerating pace of innovation, and you think about 60 years in the future, this is where we are, but we're not there, right? Like, sometimes when you see, like, these old comics, right? Or even the Jetsons, they have this crazy flying car with the little glass dome and stuff. I mean, we're not there, but that idea wasn't really crazy, I think, 60 years ago.
No, and it's funny, actually, there was on X recently, and I think I posted, there was exactly this meme of the Jetsons, and, why aren't we there yet? And I said, at the same time the Jetsons were out, when I grew up as a kid watching cartoons, that dates me, the Flintstones were also very popular. So this was the Stone Age family, and you had the Jetsons model. They're two different things that existed at the same time. And much of consciousness might exist in an old paradigm, because it's hard to throw ourselves forward into the range of things that we just don't have experience with. We haven't seen these visions of people who can vision new possibilities for humanity. I mean, the Wright brothers, just before, a few years before that, everybody thought, being propelled into the realm of birds in flight was absolutely impossible. And they did it. But I think, and this is an area I talk about in the book, is how we frame technology and how we consider it. And I mentioned it earlier with the hammer example, but there was a book, and I reference it in the book, Neil Postman, Technopoly. Tools used to be something that we created as means to a particular end, a way to do things easier. And then we created a tool, for example, the telescope, which had a bigger impact. It actually entirely changed the framework and the foundation in which we saw ourselves on this planet and as humanity. We were no longer the center of the universe. We were a small planet revolving around the sun in a galaxy that extends beyond comprehension. So it was a tool that changed our entire framework of consciousness. And now we have technology that is moving to the realm of becoming our masters in many ways, if we're not careful. And we have to think about it. Because the fact that we can produce, collate, and analyze an infinite stream of data is not necessarily that meaningful, because there's a difference between data and information, knowledge, and wisdom. We've all seen these scientific studies about in the health industry about, this causes cancer, this will fix cancer. You can prove nearly anything with enough data analyzed in a certain way and screened out in certain things. We live in a realm where data is relatively meaningless, and we are overwhelmed with it. We are overwhelmed with information that that is tremendous, that we have access to it, where once only a limited group of people had access to it. We now all have it. But the trick is not just having information. It's springing forward beyond knowledge to true wisdom. And that wisdom, again, is not going to be found simply in a spreadsheet. Wisdom comes at the intersection of knowledge and of experience and perspective. And it's some of that wisdom which, guided humanity and civilizations throughout the world for all time. It was often in the form of mythology. And so I talk about this in the book in Joseph Campbell and The Hero's Journey. And much of this seems absolutely silly and ridiculous. All these mythological creatures and these stories about these gods and the gods of war and Thor and all these things, whether they're Norse or Roman but there's something more important about all of those. When you take them as a literal story, they seem silly, but they're guiding principles that have guided humanity. And that's why we find them in all cultures throughout the world, in similar forms, but in different expressions. And we've thrown much of that wisdom out that provides, again, those guardrails, those ways of thinking about humanity, those guiding principles, those more profound spiritual principles which we can all get behind. We've discarded many of those. And we have to resurrect parts of them. We have to intersect that with new wisdom and development. And we have to bring the external knowledge and experience and wisdom and technology inputs and bring them also internally, because there's a source of intuitive knowingness about things which defies rational logic, which defies replicable scientific experience. Let's take that middle word in my book, love. Okay, do a science experiment to define what love is and to replicate it. And if you can't do that, then you must assume it doesn't exist. It's not scientifically verifiable. But it is absolutely verifiable in all of our experience. Mm-hmm. Maybe you haven't had the degree of love experience in your life, but many of us have. Most of us desire it. And it's something that doesn't come from outside. It comes from within.
I'd say it is what you are.
Absolutely. Mm-hmm. That's why I say that I think that whether it's in your experience or not, if we posit love as the ultimate connecting force between all of humanity, between all of existence, and ultimately between all of consciousness and the natural laws, that might be not a bad protocol to adopt and to look at it that way. I think it's going to be much better than and lead to much better outcomes that we all can support than assuming it's violence, survival of the fittest through violence. That's a distorted evolutionary concept.
I'm thinking about, and I have the book here. I don't know if you're familiar with Itzhak Bentov. You know who that is? This is
Stalking, I've heard of it. I've not read it.
Stalking the Wild Pendulum. This is from all the study that I did. This is for me the most probable explanation as to, you know, what this reality consists of, and what you talked in the beginning about, like about everything as vibration and sound eventually. But when he talks about manifestation, right, like the creation of something in the physical world that we experience here, you know, manifestation is not about, oh, this is what I want and now I'm going to get it, right? I'm going to ask the universe and now I'm going to get it. No, it's about turning something that is metaphysical, right, a certain feeling towards something or whatever you want to create or believe in, that, you know, into an action in the physical world. Then you are actually manifesting that thing that you want to exist, right? And I think what we are talking about is a certain future that we would want to manifest, you know, using a base layer of value, a money that, yeah, kind of solves the innate corruptness and flawed design, I'd say, in humans that makes us go, you know, to the perverse incentives of fiat money. But the main thing I want to share is, and you know, the middle word in your title is love. What Itzhak Bentov says is, and this has also been an experience in my own, you know, spiritual practices and journeys, that if we all emanate from love and we are the love, right? Like even like self-love is a flawed concept because you are already the love. Like you don't have to love yourself. That is what you are. I think you would agree, from what I know from your background, also the yogic teachings. He says, yeah, you can manifest something in the world, like you can do stuff, but it only deserves to exist if you manifest it with love. So if you have any other motivation than love for a manifestation of something in the world, then it eventually is a flawed thing that is coming into the reality. And so, yeah, that's what I was thinking about, that it's so interesting that many people from many different parts of the world, ages, backgrounds, professions, they end up, you know, that's the whole quantum entanglement talk and quantum physics. Like a lot of quantum physicists end up with the realization of, you know, a universal consciousness that, for example, in the East, they've been talking about for thousands of years, right? But they kind of like not accidentally end up there, because if that is the origin of our reality, then it's logical that they end up there. But I think that love part is, I was just thinking about it. Like I think Bitcoin would drive us towards a world where we would receive the love easier, and therefore it would help us also to manifest things in the reality that would actually help us propel us forward in the physical experience that we have.
Absolutely. No, I agree completely. And thank you for sharing that. I wasn't familiar with his work. So, yes. And again, if we have the freedom to and the spaciousness to be able to then create things from love, rather than having to do things because of the economic pressures of a system which robs from us, then we can do more things from a basis of love, from a basis of our own, you know, unique talents, our own expression of that love and that life force energy. And we're robbing all of us. We're robbing all of humanity by not providing systems to do that.
Yes.
And again, through, I would call it ignorance. we have those who believe that by extracting things from others, by getting power and control, they will be happier. And, we meet plenty of very wealthy people who are not happy, and we can meet plenty of very poor people who are amazingly happy and content. We all know the pathway to a true full life is not by what we have, but by what we are and what we feel and what we share with others. One of the teachers, most teachers of religious traditions have shared this. Now, Jesus started out in a more humble nature, but the Buddha, Siddhartha Gautama, started out in lavish luxury, having anything he wanted and never knowing and seeing privation. And he was lacking something, and he left that world to understand that there is pain, there is suffering out there, and there is some deeper principle rather than just having and living in luxury. And we need to explore that. And, that's a journey that, again, most teachers and most traditions, most mythologies have put out there for us as guiding principles. And yes, I think it ultimately is in love.
Yes.
Again, if you ask anybody,
It's as if it's as if that's a signal, right? That they've been saying the same thing from all these different places in the world for all this time, right? Like,
and let's get it finally, let's get
Exactly.
it. We can do that now.
yeah, I think to tie it back to the money, I think this is a thought I've had before, but fiat money keeps you stuck in the physical world, right? Like it keeps you focused on the physical world, literally by forcing you to buy physical things that you don't really want, right? That don't really align with your desires or your needs. Whereas I think this conversation kind of revolves around why we say Bitcoin is hope. Bitcoin is hope for a future where we can actually have more people connected to that love and embrace the future with a certain positivity that I think we are not really seeing today. And I also wanted to ask you, what for people listening or people that read your book who feel trapped in this endless consumption or drowning in debt or doing work they don't like, just feeling stuck. What kind of like practical first steps or thoughts or I want to say exercises or activities would you recommend they could take towards adopting Bitcoin, or at least starting to think about this possibility or this possible journey in their life?
Sure. It's a great question. And it's a very challenging one for most people. And I think part of it comes from that pain that can push people into recognizing something's got to give here, and stepping back from the day-to-day, the mundane, trying to find a little spaciousness in life to do some practice, whether it's taking a walk in nature, meditating, doing whatever, spiritual or religious tradition appeals, exercise, whatever it may be, to put a little distance between the rat race and you, and to give that time to think a little bit more reflectively about it. Our minds run all the time, that hamster wheel, and we can get trapped in that. And if we can watch the mind and what it does and recognize we are not the mind, we have one, and you can step back, then you can see all of the machinations, all of this crazy stuff that mostly is from other sources outside of us. We're constantly bombarded with data inputs that control much of our thinking. So stepping back from that a little bit begins to help. It's like the journey you have to do to begin to consider some crazy technology of magic internet money could actually be a better system of value than what we have and what we've grown up with and are familiar with. So we have to have a little perspective. We have to step back. And I think that's the first step. And when you begin to get engaged and consider Bitcoin, I know I have many people that, want to understand it all. Okay, well, what's this thing about, multi-signature wallets? What have you? Slow down. Start slowly, okay? You can buy it very simply, just like you would buy a product on Amazon to start. And once you begin to have a stake, okay, and watch it with some level of understanding, then hopefully you'll get a little more understanding. It'll intrigue you a little bit more. You'll see the exchange rate into fiat fluctuate in short term, and then you'll see generally on an upward trend. You'll begin to read a little bit more about it, go on your journey, and continue to step back from what so many of the talking heads say. And again, if it inclines you to talk about the 2-10-year treasury spreads and what the Fed is doing and the yen carry trade, great. Most people are not interested in that. My book has no charts and graphs in it, because while they're very helpful to some, a lot of that data is out there and is also not meaningful to others. So that's not going to capture everyone by showing a chart of the 2-10-year spreads or the M2 monetary supply. So step back from all those talking heads. Step back from the people that we are giving our power to as the experts. Think about what's going on. Step back from the political polarization. Unfortunately, that's a huge thing. I've been tweeting a little bit about recently, we have to think about how we have ended up in a situation, or how we are contributing to a situation where any one political party, any one administration, any one person has so much effect on all of our lives, all of our markets, all of global humanity. The only way that can happen is we've ceded them control. And some are more sympathetic and appealing than others. But the more pervasive these centralized control structures are in all of our lives, then the more distressing it will be when some new person comes in and exercises the control structures that we've given them for ways in which we do not appreciate and do not like. I mean, Hayek, F.A. Hayek looked at that in his book, in The Road to Serfdom. And it was these control structures that then were used by the Nazis, for example, because they captured all of the government structures to be able to implement policies and plans. If we actually have less government, all right, then there's less susceptibility to do that. Now, different cultures and traditions and experiences will be a different place on that pendulum, but step back from that. Don't be captured by that, because it's not going to be very satisfying, and it's not the answer.
So when you look back on your journey, you left your career as a wealth manager after discovering Bitcoin's potential to fix like all the flaws of the money system. Yeah, how do you look back on that career now, and maybe focus on like the game that you were playing, knowing what you know and seeing what you see now?
Sure. Well, I was within that system, and most people are, and the reality is that is the system, and you do have to operate within that system until there is a significant enough alternative. And I certainly dismissed Bitcoin when, frankly, my wife raised it to me, and I wish I had listened to her intuitive sense that something is wrong here earlier than I did. But in the early days, it was hard to tell. Would it really catch on? Would would it become to be what it is becoming now? And again, from my approach to wealth management, I didn't work in a private office. I wasn't working with hedge funds. I wasn't a trader. I was helping regular people save and invest for retirement, manage their retirement funds so they didn't run out of money before they ran out of life. So I was dealing with real people's lives. And they had to come see me and invest because of the flawed nature of the system. As I talk about in the book, most of them just wanted to save their money, but they couldn't because of the nature of the system. So I actually, because of some of these philosophical inquiries, began to realize that I needed the spaciousness myself to step back from the day-to-day responsibility of managing client funds to explore things that in my stage of life were more important to me. So I turned my practice over to someone else and actually went to India for some additional yoga teacher training. And it was there that the COVID pandemic really broke. And after coming back, I realized that everything I understood in the traditional finance world no longer seemed to make sense. I mean, how could you shut down economies? How could you shut down businesses? And the stock market, while initially tanking, then returned to positive. It didn't make any sense. As I mentioned in the book, we bought a house, and in a year, the value of the house went up 25%. And I realized the value of my house didn't go up. It's just that the value of what I would try to buy it with if I hadn't has gone down. So I left and had that spaciousness and then realized that the old system and what I was going to rely on to get me through so I didn't run out of money before I ran out of life wasn't going to work anymore. And that's what got me down the rabbit hole to look at what really is this money thing that I was managing people for so long with, and why was it so hard for them to do just what they wanted to do, which is save for the future. And so that's what took me down the hole and got me here. And then, once you get down that hole, again, because of my philosophical and my spiritual orientation, I realized that we need to bring more of that middle word in my book into the dialogue that's often missing, because I think that's the vision and the dream and the something that the leaders in this space need to be talking as much about than just the mechanics of the financial system. That's all important. The technological development is not my area of expertise, and thank God for Satoshi and all of the developers that are doing tremendous work on that. And again, like any technology, it can be used for good or ill. It has the potential to be used for great good if guided by wisdom. And so I hope to add to that in the space.
Yeah, thank you so much for sharing that, because I really want to have more conversations like this, because I think we talk a lot about the problem, right? Fiat money, etc., and what that is given to us, and there's a lot of conversations about factually Bitcoin, but I think this is what could be the North Star, right? Like, this is where we eventually get, and I think that could also help us to maybe not have as many distractions as we sometimes have, like from day to day, or what does the price do, or who adopted it now, or I don't like that bank or person or whatever, right? Like, I've kind of come to a place where I think, okay, if we make sure in whatever way that Bitcoin just doesn't go away, then over a long enough time frame, and I hope in our lifetimes, we will see some of the things that we are talking about, in this conversation. And I think that starts with your own individual life and shaping a new path where Bitcoin is that base layer, right? And then from there we just try to share like we're doing now, and hopefully inspire other people to start exploring that path as well. To to finish up, I want to ask you two more questions.
Sure.
So looking at the future that you envision in the book, what do you see as the biggest intellectual or maybe cultural hurdle to persuade people to eventually embrace Bitcoin, not just as the better money that we think it is, but as the foundation for the freer, more peaceful world that you describe in it?
Yeah, it's a good question and a big question and a tough one. So I think,
Yeah.
again, the more we build the new system that makes the old one obsolete, and the more that old system begins to crumble under its own weight of a very fragile foundation, then people are going to begin to look for a more solid structure. And people have been prognosticating the demise of the fiat system for decades. And it hasn't come yet. And we don't know when it will, but the pace seems to be accelerating with the tremendous levels of debt, the global polarization and conflict that we are having, coupled with technological change. We're probably seeing the shifting sands of that old system. And so the more we can build this new system that makes the old one obsolete, then people can move over in their own time and pace, and it can grow and evolve, and they can begin to hear voices that don't just seem like, it's a crypto scam. All right. That's a lot of bad signal and a bad noise, which has been out there and it's been real. But as we create bolder visions, as it attracts more energy within the system at all layers. And, I understand that, many Bitcoin hardcore purists would like it to be a solely peer-to-peer technology without any institutional involvement or government involvement. And I'm not necessarily endorsing, government involvement per se, but if it is going to be the new base layer of money for the world, then everybody needs to be on it. And that is not going to happen overnight, all right? But that pace is accelerating tremendously. And as that happens, then people can begin to move into this new system and see it as a better thing and begin to hear more voices that resonate with value propositions, with beginning to understand that, this is solving intractable problems in Africa, in the global South, where people can't function with a layer of even fiat currency that works. In the developed West, we have luxuries that most people around the world don't have. And if you understand that story of what's happening in many places where they don't have a functional currency, where you have a store of value that depreciates by, thousands of % a week, then you begin to realize there's something more here. This is deeper than a couple of cypherpunks getting rich. And that's going to be a more compelling vision to begin to pull people over. And I think it's just going to snowball. I hope it doesn't, in many ways, result because there is a cataclysmic destruction of our existing system. I think we all want to see it fade away. But we're better if we can do that in a more peaceful and calm transition that causes less pain for everyone. And, we're still in early adopter stage. We all know that, who raise it to people who, think it's ridiculous. But we're going to move towards tipping point. And again, the more voices who talk about much broader visions, I think it's going to provide more compelling reasons to begin to look at it and to step back and think, maybe there's something there. As I know you and Rob, you posed in a podcast with Robin, is there something there to this? or is this just some fiction and some crazy thing that's going to go away? And you realize that there's more there, and it's not just about money. It's about life. It's about love.
Thank you.
We can get there.
Yes. Yes, I agree. All right. I'd love to ask you my last question, and I ask everyone the same question, which is, what is a core belief that you will never let go of?
I think it's that love is the ultimate connection between everything. It is the primary energy frequency that in a universe that, my mind certainly cannot comprehend, the one thing I can comprehend is the most powerful force that I know, the force that most resonates more deeply as truth, ultimately is love.
Thank you for sharing that, and thank you for this fantastic conversation. I really enjoyed it. I hope others can find value in it. And yeah, man, I really, really appreciate your time and sharing.
Thank you, Bram. I appreciate your time. I appreciate being able to have the dialogue and to be able to spread the message and keep doing the good work and spreading the message.
Let's do it. Thank you.
All right.
Cheers.
Great.
Bye.
Thank you. Be well.
You too.
I hope you enjoyed this episode. If you did, you can click here to find more just like it, and click here to find all Bitcoin for Millennials podcast episodes. Also, please like this video if you want to help shine a light on the message of Bitcoin, and subscribe to my channel to stay connected. I hope to see you for a next episode. Bye.